Hello, everyone. Sorry we're a little late today. We got a little bit disrupted.
What's this we stuff?
I'm sorry. It's all my fault. I accept all responsibility. I am Alan Berkson. I am the Director of Community Outreach for Freshdesk, and I'm joined, as always, by the Dr. Disruptive, Jonathan Yarmis. Welcome to Pardon My Disruption. We've got some interesting things to talk about today, but the first thing I wanted to talk about, and maybe we'll start with pet peeves.
You just get it out of the way up front. Yeah.
Well, one of my pet peeves.
We could do a whole show on this.
One of my pet peeves is the word disruption and how people use it. It's a marketing term. And in the immortal words of Inigo Montoya, I do not think that word means what you think it means. So maybe we can start off with a little bit of a discussion on what exactly is disruption, why it's not necessarily a good thing, and how maybe vendors and consumers should look at it.
First of all, I want to claim I'm not a Johnny-come-lately to this term. In 2007, when I was working at the analyst firm AMR Research, they wanted to give me the title of the VP of Advanced and Emerging Technologies. And I said, no, that sends the message, ignore me for the next several years. And I added the term disruptive to the title in 2007. And client and friend, Rich Gaby, after an event, I hadn't met him at the time, and he yelled across the bar to me at the reception for this particular conference. He said, hey, Dr. Disruptive. Right then and there, I knew I had my personal branding. I literally went to the hotel room that night and secured the domain name. And
this was 2007.
Yeah. In the intervening 7 years, boy, has the term been devalued considerably, and anything that's remotely interesting now gets branded. It used to be soap powder was new and improved. Now vendors, when they've got nothing interesting to say about their product, slap now with more disruption. Yeah. First of all, number one, vendors, stop that. Disruption is not a user value proposition.
Right. Nobody
came to work this morning going, my life would be so much easier if it were disrupted. And that to me is, silly thing number one. Don't use the term. Users care about things like migration paths and coexistences. To me also, disruption is it's more of a market force and an economic thing.
Right.
A disruption is something that changes the fundamental economics of a marketplace. So you come in, Uber, for instance, let's use an example of somebody who is disruptive. What's disruptive about Uber? Before they existed, if you wanted to pick up passengers in New York City, you had to get a taxi medallion. It cost $1 million or more. I don't know what I mean, because the government decided to impose artificial scarcity on the number of taxis that could roam in the streets of New York. For whatever reason, it probably made sense 70 years ago.
Right.
It
was like the 20s or 30s when that number was.
Okay, yeah, when we were but wee lads.
Well,
but Uber came along and said, there's something inherently broken with this model, with pervasive mobility and things like that. Are there things we can do differently to transform the way people hail transportation, and hail, movement of, in their grand vision, and to justify a $19 billion valuation or whatever they've got. It's not just moving people, but moving goods as well. But they basically said, the economic model of scarcity was broken. We can do things that get around the system, and in so doing, make it hard for incumbents to respond. And I think that's one of the essences of disruption, why it's such a powerful force when it in fact exists, because it makes it hard for the incumbent to respond, because what these people have done is attacked the fundamental business model of the incumbent. And yes, you can say the incumbent could respond, but were they to do so? quite often the self-impact is worse than the impact on the newcomer. They'll hurt their own business. They have strong reasons to want to preserve the maintenance of the status quo. So I think disruption is a much rarer instance, but there's certainly examples of it. But a new feature generally is not disruptive.
I think the differentiation that people have, or they put the two together, is innovation versus disruption.
Yeah.
Many people try to innovate, but disruption is a much harder proposition.
Yeah, much harder, much rarer. It's, you can look for inefficiencies. Innovation is improvement in an existing model or process. Disruption often comes where somebody says, we've got a new set of capabilities, infrastructure, changing user requirements, whatever it is that enable a fundamentally different approach that relies on having a virgin field. And that's oftentimes why it's so hard for existing players to be disruptive, because so much of what they've done is built on a legacy approach, and they've succeeded on the very essence of that, where a newcomer comes in and says, I've got zero installed base. I don't care about Microsoft, for instance. They're a great example of somebody who has traditionally had a hard time being disruptive because they've had such vested interest in the status quo, where a newcomer can come in. Let's look at Apple, and we've had this conversation before, the difference between Apple and Microsoft in the smartphone business. Apple was able to come in and say, I've got zero installed base, so this is all upside for me, and I can come and do things in a wholly different fashion that challenge the way carriers have done things, that have challenged the way users have acquired technology. And I don't care, that it's different, because I have no vested interest in the maintenance of the status quo. So it's real easy to be disruptive when you have zero installed base.
So from a enterprise business point of view, because you talked about disruption is not necessarily something consumers want.
Right.
Why?
Because you've got massive investments. I'd say that probably the biggest word is inertia. There are a whole bunch of things that if we could wave a magic wand and say, okay, users change today, it's a lot easier to change technology than it is to change user behavior. We can swap out our variety of devices. I've got a smartwatch, I'll use a different one. I've got the now sporting a band on my other wrist. All of this stuff I can change, but the entrenched behaviors change much more slowly. And then there's a significant difference, if you're thinking from an enterprise perspective, from purchases versus the installed base. When you make a new purchase, it's easy to say, I'm going to begin using the new stuff.
Right.
But it takes a long time to change the installed base to a point where the new purchases represent a preponderance of the devices in the enterprise. This is, by the way,
and it's a measure of risk. You don't have the saying, nobody got fired for buying IBM, or fill in the blank for, there's no there's a reason for that.
But there's also something why this mobile revolution is so much more fascinating, powerful, and fast-moving than anything we've seen before. Because it used to be the average life cycle of a PC. You bought something and you had it for 3 to 5 years. The average cell phone, we turn over in 21 months or so. So we can turn over the installed base rapidly. So the least common denominator on cell phones, which is such an important consideration in the enterprise. We want to reach everybody, so what's the least common denominator? On desktop computers, it's probably IE5 and Windows 95 with 2 gig of RAM and a 200 meg gig hard disk, or something small like that. So the mainstream of desktop computing changes slowly. The mainstream of mobile computing changes much more quickly, and with it, our ability to at least accept change in the raising, but it's that least common denominator element that is so important and so challenging to the enterprise, because they have to aim toward the bottom 1/3, the middle or something like that. And in certain conditions, that's a low bar.
Well, first of all, if you're following along on Twitter, you can follow along with hashtag PMD. our good friend Fred McClymon's made a note that users don't buy new products because they are disruptive, but rather they bring new and better or alternative value. So they're not looking for a disruption. So that's why, as a vendor, you don't want to say you're disruptive. You just want to say you have what your value is and how it's different.
Right. You know, disruptive can be attention getting. You know, so you say you're disruptive, it's like, oh, you know, somehow they're different, but the disruption's got to be couched in terms of a user value proposition. You know, I probably spent too many years working for PR firms, you know, but I think a lot about that user value proposition, and disruption is of value really to no one, you know, except maybe historians. Right. Historians will love to say, oh, that was the disruptive moment. Right. But it's not. So
it's an after the fact way of describing something that happened, as opposed to I'm going to disrupt.
Yeah, or it's great for people like me. You know, we analysts love things like this. You know, because what, you know, if there's a status quo, clients don't need me. Why talk to Jonathan if nothing's going on? So I go, ooh, disruption, and they get nervous. You know, so it's good for me, but that's probably about it.
So then it should go back to just saying new and improved.
You know, well, it's more than new and improved. You know, although both of those are good. New isn't a value proposition either. Right. You know, and improved, you know, I don't think conveys enough. You know, I mean, what we're taking here are different approaches, you know, and I think the opportunity is to cast things in terms of user value propositions. Right. What does the user care about? You know, because for so many times, you know, and this is, I think, when we talk about the consumerization of IT, you know, this is a change that everybody pays lip service to, but I don't think have really understood that user requirements. I mean, I remember, you know, a famous cartoon talking, it showed an enterprise screen, maybe an SAP system, you know, and it had about 5 million fields with no design on it whatsoever. And then it showed Google that has a rectangular box.
One box.
Yeah.
One box.
Yeah.
Right.
No, I mean, when's the last time you read a manual? Well, I'm probably asking the wrong person, but you know, I used to read these things.
RTFM?
Yes, read the friggin' manual. Yeah, you know, that's tech support 101.
Right.
Yeah, but nobody does that. I had a problem with my car this week.
Right.
You know, did I read the manual? No, I Googled, you know, things and found the solution to my problem.
I work off the assumption that whatever problem I have from a technological or someone's already had it.
Yes.
And already posted it.
Yes. Yeah.
So the answer's out there.
It's a wonderful world, but I think enterprises, you know, vendors have failed to fully understand the power of that community. You know, I laugh, you know, another pet peeve as long as we're going down these things.
Pet peeves.
You know, frequently asked questions. Whoever, if you read FAQs, my first reaction to most of the FAQs is, who in the world is asking these questions?
There really should be, here's questions. I'm giving you my marketing material in the form of questions.
Right. Here are questions I'd like you to ask. Right. Why is your product so wonderful? Yeah. Right. You know, why should I buy your product and no one else's? Right. But, you know, we've got all sorts of sources for the questions people are answering. Why don't you answer those questions? You know, so this consumerization phenomenon, I think, you know, has brought about a lot of changes and really is the disruptive, you know, the macro level disruptive force that's going on. And, you know, IT keeps thinking, I'm going to get control back one of these days. You know, ooh, cloud computing sounds like an extension of enterprise architectures. Maybe here's my opportunity to get rid of the word control.
Right. Yeah. Right. So disruption, we talked about disruption, talked about Apple. So I think that it makes sense. Our next topic is Apple Pay. Because that was a word that came out in every single piece of coverage for that announcement.
Yes.
And yet.
And well, you know, the whole payments thing is such a fascinating area for me, because this is one where everybody is fighting over it, and the entrenched interests are so large that they're willing to fight to the death on this one. Because, you know, I mean, if we assume that at some point this may well be our payment device, you know,
Right.
with NFC or some other form of communication, that we don't need credit cards, we don't need anything other than our cell phones. You can see that we're fighting over, you know, I don't know, probably something beyond billions, you know, maybe trillions of dollars.
Right.
And if you just take a percent out of that, it's worth fighting over. And so Apple announced Apple Pay, and you know, Apple has a pretty good track record of introducing things, generating customer demand, and forcing people along with it. This is one of those ones where it's not going to be quite as smooth, because as soon as Apple announced Apple Pay, you had, you know, a few merchants going, not only are we not enabling Apple Pay, we're just shutting off touchless forms of payment at all our terminals. Some of, you know, which was, you know, not so much about the technical immaturity or unreadiness, but rather that the merchants have signed on to something called Current C, which is their own approach to payment, saying, no, we want to control the payment stream and the information stream and get all of that stuff for ourselves, no matter how poorly implemented the solution is. I mean, this Current C one is, I'm hard pressed, you know, if a camel is a horse designed by committee, you know, the Current C should only be as
Right.
good looking as a camel. You know, this is,
Right.
it's, okay, we'll come up with a code that you have to scan on your phone, and, you know, the number of steps that are required, you know, Apple, you know, is hopefully wants the solution to be, you walk in, you look on the terminal, you press OK, and it's done.
Right.
Where the merchants are, you know,
Well,
take pictures, you know.
But there's a whole disintermediation that's been going on in a lot of industries.
Another word I hate, by the way.
Okay.
Yeah, because there are a lot of things we're not disintermediating. Some we are, but a lot of instances we've just created new opportunities for re-intermediation. There are new intermediaries.
Okay.
Yeah.
But what's happening is that I think with the payment systems, the vendors or different parties are now interested in getting a piece of that.
Everybody wants it. The merchant wants it. The device manufacturer wants it. The platform wants it. The cell phone company wants it. The banks want, you know, there are 4 or 5 or 6 parties, each of whom want a piece of the transaction, each of whom are implementing their own solutions. And then they hope that, you know, what? The users are going to pick one over the other? You know, not likely.
So
you know how bad this is when, who was it? You know, one of the platforms was named ISIS. and they had to rename it because they realized not only do we not have brand equity, you know, maybe there's a negative connotation that having a payment platform called ISIS is the wrong thing.
So what factors are going to drive where this goes?
You know, the thing that's always, you know, there are 2 factors. You know, one is convenience. What's the easiest solution? But the most important one always is user adoption. Because you know, one of those things, you know, de facto standards tend to win out over de jure standards every time. You get 1 million users, or, you know, these days I guess the magic number is 1 billion. You know,
Right.
you get 1 billion users, you've got a pretty good chance of establishing,
Right.
you know, a standard. You know, the challenge is going to be in this one, there are so many parties who can make the experience bad. So if Apple had a great solution, you know, the 3rd time you walk into a place, try and use Apple Pay and it doesn't work. You know, I mean, part of the interesting thing out of this is, let's go back to user value proposition. You know, I don't know about you. You know, I haven't been anywhere for the most part where I've said, you know, taking a credit card out of my pocket is so difficult that it's going to stymie my, you know, transaction. I don't go to Starbucks.
But that's not true. I have, when I'm sitting in an Uber cab. I don't have to pull my, and
you don't have to, but is that why you're using Uber?
Yeah.
No.
It's one of the reasons.
No, you're using Uber because hailing it is easy,
Well,
and the price is
part of it,
competitive.
but the other part of it is that I don't have to pull out my credit card.
You can do that in a taxi these days. You know,
Yeah.
in a New York City
Right.
taxi, there are.
But it's the whole, but it becomes part of the whole experience.
Yes, yeah, but
So
I
that's
think
what you're talking about, is the user adoption is based on not just, the payment has to be part of a whole experience that makes it easy.
yes,
When I buy on Amazon, I don't have to pull out my credit card.
yes, actually,
I'm going to be talking about is in the same way that it's not really a burden to carry a watch. That with cell phones, a lot of people have become accustomed to not wearing wristwatches.
Yeah.
Similarly, we'll get accustomed to not having to carry a credit card. So what we see is a small benefit now can be a big benefit.
Yes, and Arnie made the observation that like people don't wear a watch. What's a small, but I wear a smartwatch, but I'm
that doesn't count. Yeah. You wear a watch that doesn't count time, and you have a phone that you don't use to make calls.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But I think you're right. This is one of those things. Some years from now, we're going to be in a largely cashless, credit cardless environment where something is going to be our payment mechanism. But the challenge gets to be there, whereas a lot of technologies we've been able to, through force of adoption, drive utilization, and force people to say, look, there are so many people out there who are using this. I better embrace it because it's an opportunity. With these payment systems, there are so many parties involved who can stymie parts of the process, that it's one of those things where it's going to be a slow transition. Maybe Bitcoin is something we talk about on occasion. So how do we have these, if you will, cashless currencies, or things like that? All of these are parts of a solution that 10 years from now will be ubiquitous. But unlike a lot of other technologies that I follow, that you can follow, aggressive adoption curves and identify tipping points at which point these things are going to happen. I think payments is one where there are so many people who can screw up the adoption and stymie it, and will do so for self-interested purposes, because the amount of money we're fighting over is so large that it's not going to be one of those smooth adoptions.
Excellent. All right, so let's move on to some more consumer-related, and we're both big consumers of media. And another word which I think or another term that I think people are having a lot of trouble with and trying to wrap their heads around is cord cutting. This idea that we're locked into cable companies for a package of media, and that somehow we can cut the cord and consume content outside of that.
Another one of those things where the vested interests. Well, it's clearly a generational thing,
right?
Where I am not a cord cutter. I pay the cable system for just about everything. Where I'm not sure if my son has cable service, cable television service.
Television service.
Yes, yeah.
Television
yes,
service, right.
he is paying for the wire.
Right.
And that's one of the fascinating things where, I think the cable companies have been denying that they're cord cutters for a long time. But the numbers are starting to show up.
So HBO announces that they're going to have a direct-to-consumer.
Right, HBO Go, which today requires you have a cable subscription, will be available as an independent package. Some of this, one of the arguments the cable companies have, the content providers have always made, and this is one of those ones where I hate agreeing with them, because they're generally lying scum, and but the argument has been made.
Wait, let me just cross them off our sponsor list. Okay, no cable companies.
But the argument has been made, if we unbundle, two bad things will happen. One, you'll actually end up paying more for the set of services you want than when we've got them all bundled together. And two, there are a set of services that you get today as part of your package that, should they have to stand on their own merits, may not get the requisite funding. So we might lose all of the good TLC documentaries and things like that. And I think both of those are legitimate concerns when it comes to unbundling the packages we get. At the same time, I think the trend is inexorable as we have more and more high-speed internet connections wherever.
Inexorable?
Yes, that's
inexorable.
Come on, that's not a $50 word. No.
25
I
$25.
don't- Yeah. Do I hear 10? Yeah.
Right.
Where did you go to school? Yeah. And what did you major in? Yeah.
Math.
Yeah. You should have gone to a liberal arts college like Hamilton. We got a good grounding in English. Yeah. But I think the answer is, inexorable. It's going to happen. The question is when, and I think things like HBO unbundling it, are one, a seminal event, and two, a reaction to the fact that, guess what? There's money to be made in this quality content. If you look at what Netflix is doing, they've got a business model that, doesn't require anybody subscribe to a cable company video package. You're getting large number of viewers outdrawing networks on occasion.
I'm going to use another word that you probably hate. Paradigm shift. Right? Well, because I look at so my kids are pluralists. They call them anybody born after 2000. They call them pluralists. They consume 80% of their content on YouTube.
Yes. And YouTube, Google's figured this out, launching a music service this week.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's not even about the networks. They're not even watching. They're not even consuming that content that way.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's what are the changes you have? This goes to disruption. It used to be the ability to broadcast was in the hands of a few people who could spend high amounts of money on extreme production qualities. We've lowered production quality standards. Anybody can be a broadcaster.
Well,
look at us.
Right. But you can do HD video here, right?
Yes.
Right. Yeah, look at us.
Yeah, we're broadcasters.
Yeah, on YouTube.
Yeah, the Pardon My Disruption TV network.
Although if you're listening, Bloomberg or Reuters, we're happy to move the show. Absolutely. I want to get to one of our favorite topics is Twitter. Twitter had IBM and Twitter had an announcement, and Twitter is this amazingly difficult yet powerful tool.
Yes.
It's got the worst onboard, upfront user experience of any product, and yet people might even say it's changing the geography of nations.
And on the one hand, yes, it's an enormous repository of valuable information. There are so many things where, how did you find that? There are so many news events that the first place they took place was on Twitter, from Sully Sullenberger landing in the Hudson River, to my favorite story is Bin Laden's capture. Some kid down the block tweeted, "Hey, there are all these helicopters flying overhead." That was the first evidence of that there are so many things like that. But
so Twitter announces that their revenue is going up. But
their user count is stalled, and they're trying to say, but people don't really, that's not a true measure of how many people are using Twitter, because how many people go to Twitter but don't have Twitter accounts. Part of the problem, there are several problems. Number one, infrastructure, and Twitter really is infrastructure.
That's what I said.
It's really hard to monetize. Well, what is their business?
What's business?
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
No, and that's one of the gist of their problems. They are infrastructure, and they're trying to be an advertising business, and they're actually doing a bad job of both of those.
Explain what you mean by their infrastructure.
What you want is, and the whole notion of the IBM deal is, the tweet stream has enormous value, that there's this incredible collection of information in the Twitter stream, and what we need are innovative ways to go find all of the information, draw connections. And so IBM has said they're going to take the whole tweet stream, and they'll use Watson, which is a great kind of natural language query interface between disparate information sources, to make it easier for users to find information in the tweet stream.
Right.
And there should be 10,000 of those kinds of solutions. The problem Twitter has at some level is, how do you monetize that? So if you want to buy the whole tweet stream, it costs a lot of money. If you want to buy selected
Fireworks,
pieces,
yeah.
yeah,
Right.
if you want to buy selected pieces, it's a different price. And who's going to buy it, and how are we going to connect it? At the same time, Twitter's also in the business of, we've got all of these users who are tweeting things, and we know all of these things about them. We can sell advertising to advertisers who want to reach our users, and we'll inject it in the tweet
And that's
stream.
like that's that gold at the end of the rainbow that they really want to monetize this.
Yes.
But I think that's a double-edged sword for them.
Oh, well, no, I don't think it's a double-edged sword for them, because I think they can do it in ways that aren't terribly intrusive. I mean, users get up in arms, oh, there are going to be ads in my tweet stream. If 70% of your tweet stream is ads, that's a problem. If 1 in every 10 or 1 in every 15 or somewhere over the side there are ads, it's not going to kill the experience. It hasn't killed Facebook's.
Right.
I don't think it.
But when I talk about that, I don't use Twitter.
Right.
I use Hootsuite.
Yes.
Or I use
TweetDeck.
TweetDeck. Or
Yeah.
I don't. I'm not on there. So that's got to be a problem.
Oh, and it's been an ongoing problem. If you remember.
So for me, Twitter is infrastructure.
Yes, and Twitter has had a terrible on-again, off-again relationship. Early on, it was, wow, let's have all of these third-party tools using the Twitter API. And then somewhere along the way, Twitter realized, wow, all of those people are stealing away our monetization opportunities. Let's kill the third-party ecosystem, which they largely effectively did, other than those people who are willing to share revenue with them.
Right.
And now, of late again, it's like, darn, we killed the third-party ecosystem. Those people actually add value. We want those people back. If you're a developer, I mean, fool me once, shame on.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They've got so many. I always wrestle whether to use the word challenges or problems. They got so many problems.
But do they have, or are they just being patient? As opposed to jumping in, they're just sitting there and.
Wow, you've been drinking a Dick Costello Kool-Aid, but they're being patient. Yeah, this is a world that rewards patience. I mean, if you're Masayoshi-san at SoftBank, it's okay to have a 500-year strategic plan.
Right.
Twitter, I think, being patient.
Look,
they've had these problems. For years now, a terrible onboard experience, an incomplete ecosystem, an unclear vision.
Yet they're still one of the most powerful tools on the planet.
Yes.
Because the reason why I say patience is that there's actually a trend. I mean, Zuckerberg comes out in his earnings and is telling people, I'm going to spend all this money and I don't plan to make any.
Yes.
But
That's the Jeff Bezos model.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, but left unsaid in both of theirs is, but I could if I wanted to. I choose not to. Twitter is like, we've got a mission statement. Oh, that's not really a mission statement. It's I mean, they are such a mess and still haven't solved their fundamental problems. It's a terrible user experience. So I always, my mother, I told her to get on Facebook, and day one, she got value from being on Facebook.
Right.
She saw pictures of the grandkids. I tell my mother, do not go near Twitter. No way, no how. It's not worth it. And their out-of-box experience is so terrible. Even those of us who've been doing it for years, and I started, I signed up. So it's, I'm coming up on about my 7th anniversary. I've tweeted over 30,000 times. 10 times a day. Yeah. Way too much. It's a sickness.
I always tell people that, look, I'm a tech guy, but it took me 2 or 3 months to get it.
Yeah.
And I'm not even saying that I even totally get it now, but that's the
I've been telling you that for years.
What's the goal of the IBM? To create a product that somehow improves the onboarding experience?
The question was, what's the goal of the IBM deal? And I don't think it has anything to do with the onboarding experience. It has to do, I think it's one of those things where, IBM has a need to demonstrate the value of Watson, and I think it makes for really good publicity for both parties. And there is a lot of value to be mined in the tweet
I'm
stream.
going to use another word. I'm doing buzzword bingo today. Big data.
Yes.
But that's what it's about. That there's
don't get me on my big data.
There's
brand.
so much information to be mined.
That's the word.
There's a term that is in the lexicon in businesses now, and the term is listening. And throughout the history of business, listening was never part of what businesses would do. They would broadcast. And so IBM is saying, you guys are listening. I have this tool that's great at figuring out what you're listening to. Here's a value proposition. But it's still, the challenge still becomes, the data's there, but you have to ask the right questions.
And my standard rant about big data is, I had a summer job in high school working around the corner here at 1133 Westchester Avenue, which was the headquarters of IBM's data processing division.
Data processing.
Yeah, data processing. So in the early 1970s, we processed data. And there's this hierarchy: data, information, knowledge, wisdom, and we've, in the intervening, that was a long time ago, wasn't it? 40 years. Yeesh. Yeah. We've moved up the information hierarchy till we get to 2014, and the great value is a return to data. No. The challenge is how do we take all of that data and turn it into actionable value? And if that's something that Twitter and IBM can demonstrate with Watson, it's a big win for both of them. Taking that massive information, that presumably has some value to be mined there, but we have no convenient way of doing it. And search.twitter.com, it has done nothing to advance the value of that information repository. So I think it's all about unlocking the value in that accumulated pile of information.
And if Twitter, something that put a view on consulting payroll and ask the question, what can we do to monetize and leverage this infrastructure capability that we have?
Well, the question was, if Twitter put us on the payroll and said, how do we monetize this? Well, let me give a somewhat flip answer, and that somewhat flip answer would be, I'd go sell to somebody. The challenge they've got with unlocking the value and making money for themselves is difficult. So would I sell to somebody like Alibaba, who has a whole vast ability to sell things, Alibaba or Amazon, somebody who could make that real-time information with commerce opportunities to turn that into a value stream. So number one, I'd look to sell, and there are only a couple of people who can afford to buy them. Number two, if I were to then say, okay, assuming I'm not going to sell, what would I do? Number one, I want more users with more touch points. So I tweet 10 times a day. That's seemingly a lot. No, what I really want to do is have, with the Internet of Things, more things, putting out more information in real time, and then figuring out the economic angle. So now that I've got more information out there, how do I sell that information to the people who could value from it? So if they became an information hub for the Internet of Things, I think that would be an incredibly powerful position.
Well, if you think about what's going on with the thing that landed on the comet, which is sending data, and people are fascinated just by watching that. But there's all sorts of data points of things that could be putting out that. Yeah. But I think like cats tweeting. That would be good.
Don't quit your day job.
And in the past, just from my perspective, I've always thought, and it's the challenge is that it's not a high multiple, but I would pay. I would pay for the ability to tweet, because that's the value. I would pay for my account, just like I paid for any other service that I'm using. I would pay for Twitter.
Yeah,
it's hard to, but that's a limited monetization, and that's
very limited, and that's one of the tough choices all sorts of people face when they if you're a startup company. Do I want a few people paying, or do I want everybody using it, and I'll figure out the monetization scheme down the road?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, which I think if you want to talk about it, leads to an interesting transition where monetization schemes, today it's all been advertising. It may be too late to talk about it. But Ello, which hit everybody's radar screen. Yeah, that's like it hit.
Wait, let me ask you a question. Have you done an update on Ello more than once?
The only update I put on Ello was how do I find my friends on Ello,
right? To
which I didn't get a response.
So just explain for what Ello is or would like to be.
Yeah. Ello would like to be Facebook minus the advertising. So it was a new social network that was everybody's darling. They just got another, I think, $5.5 million this week.
They did my favorite trend of you have to be invited.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it spread because everybody, it's like, oh, Facebook advertising, they're intruding on my privacy. I want to go to Ello, and we all went to Ello, and it was like, hello, and again, the solution to a problem nobody's had. How many people woke up this morning and goes, I wish I had another social platform on which to share my information. One that only has a few people, has a interface that is eerily reminiscent of green screens.
It was horrible. It was the worst user experience I've seen on a new product in a long time.
Yeah, it belongs in the Twitter Hall of Fame. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was one of those things. I give them credit for having the thing go viral. They got a few people who told a few people, and pretty soon there were tens of thousands of us signed up, looked at it, had a terrible out-of-box experience, couldn't figure out the feature set. And oh, by the way, it didn't diminish from my utility of Facebook, which is what it was designed to do. It's one of those terrible things. It's that the network effect, the value of a network. This was Bob Metcalf who founded Ethernet. Said the value of network is inversely proportional to the square of the number of users, or not inversely, it's proportional to the square of the number of users. Facebook's got 1 billion people on it. 1 billion squared is a pretty high value network.
So when you talk about entering into a market, you always think about, is it a winner-take-all market or is it a competitive market? For commodities, it's generally a competitive market. Are social networks a winner-take-all? I mean, can someone come in and compete with Facebook, or does somebody have to, I won't say the word, disrupt Facebook?
Let me take that a different approach. What do we really want out of a social network per se? And this is something Facebook has wrestled with from the very day it began. And in fact, if you read or read its S1 prior to going public, and most people don't, I get perverse pleasure from reading things like that. They said one of their biggest competitive threats was the fact that people will connect with Facebook but not do things on Facebook.com. So what do I really want out of a social network? What I want at some level is wherever I go on the web, I want to be aware of my friends who also happen to be on that platform. So if I go to TripIt, I can see where my friends are traveling. If I go to Yelp, I can see where my friends are eating. And so what I really want is a portable social network, a network graph that enables me to see what my friends are doing on disparate platforms. The problem Facebook has is the same question we're talking about with regards to Twitter. In that instance, how does it monetize? If you're doing it on Yelp, can they steal some of Yelp's advertising revenue, or does Yelp get all of the benefits? So I think the answer is, what we want is our social graph to be portable across the network. That's not in Facebook, Facebook's core values. So they enable it today, but the moment it starts to become the dominant approach, it's not good for Facebook. So I think that's one of the things where Google, with its on-again, off-again attempts to define what Google Plus is, and is it a social
Right.
network? And the answer is it's, pretty much failed at that. But can it be the universal connective tissue across which we know where our Google Plus friends are doing on other properties?
Right.
I think there is a longer term opportunity there for Google to play in that space. But in the short term, we're still posting pictures of cats on Facebook, and that's its dominant value proposition. And we haven't yet seen the full expression of the value of a portable, social graph, and the new buzzword these days, the activity graph as well.
Right.
Who do we know, where are they, and what are they doing? And that opportunity still exists. So that to me is where Facebook is vulnerable. Today we do everything on Facebook.com and spend a lot of time doing that, and so doing share a lot of information with them. The moment we get an alternative that connects all of our disparate activities across all of the things, the 90% of the time we're not using Facebook. That's the thing. Facebook looks dominant when you talk about social activities. When you actually look at how we spend our time and how we'd like to use social activities, they actually have a very piece of that market.
Right.
And none of the above is the dominant player.
Right. All right. It's time for kudos and pet peeves. I want to start with.
I thought all we did was.
I want to start with one that's actually both.
Okay.
Google inbox. So kudos because they.
Well, let's talk about again what inbox is.
So Google.
You can do it. I have faith in you.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Google came out with a new app to manage your Gmail inbox, trying to not just change the way you read your email, but also help you manage your time. Sort of changing it from just an email device to a productivity device. I think that's a good way to describe it.
Yeah, by contrast, today your your Gmail inbox, or any inbox for the most part, is just a chronological list.
Right. So the kudo is the viral aspect of how they got people, because I got to give them credit for the fact that everybody wanted a Google invite. Everybody wanted an inbox invite, and I saw them on Twitter, I saw them on Facebook, I saw them on LinkedIn. Hey, anybody got an invite? And that's the kudo.
Yeah, but I think some of it, let's contrast it with the Elo viral thing, where we all wanted it but weren't sure why. With inbox, they're attempting to solve a real problem, and the real problem is that a chronological list is not how I really want to consume my email.
Or, well, yeah, how many times do you read an email and then mark it unread?
Yes, or all sorts of things, or star it, or
right.
Yeah, I actually have a complex set of rules that automatically moves things into folders.
That totally surprises me. Really?
Yeah,
you're like Mr. Gadget.
Yes, I am. But because there are a whole bunch of things. When I didn't do that, I probably, it's not surprising with all the stuff I got. Half of this has come from daily deals. I probably get 60 daily deal emails a day, and so, the net result, I'm getting hundreds of emails a day. Most of, how do I find the gems, through all of the stuff and the way, or being the interrupt driven, oh, look, another daily deal email.
Right.
Now I automatically sweep all of those into a folder where I'll look at it once or twice a day, and it's nowhere near as disruptive.
All right, and installation defaults. Another pet peeve.
That one kills me. This is one of those ones when you go to install a piece of software, and some of the most egregious offenders are, let's call them out. It's Java, where it wants to install the ask.com toolbar and make Ask your default search provider. And I wouldn't feel terrible about them presenting those options, but how many installations do things that you have to uncheck every box that's checked and check every box that's unchecked. You know, it's amazing how good they are at picking all the options you don't want. You know, that they're consciously user hostile and really good at it. You know,
Right.
and then when you do things like that, it's bad enough that they do it, that you'd love to have some, you know, ability to go, oops, I was only kidding, or darn it, you tricked me. Undo those things. But undoing those things requires a level of system knowledge
Right.
that is at the edges of what I'm capable of.
Right.
You know, and
and
my mother would, you know, live
Right.
with Ask.com for the rest of her life because she wouldn't know how to change it.
And a more technical is, on my desktop, I have a solid state drive as my C drive, as my system drive, and then I have a bigger drive that's slower. That's where I install all my software. But a lot of software doesn't give you the opportunity to tell you where to put it.
Right, right.
And it's filling up my little solid state drive, and that pisses me off.
Yeah, now there's a third world problem.
That's it. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, but I think, again, you know, the notion is we're treating our users like idiots. You know, it's like,
Right.
okay, you know, you get it, you know, McAfee, whose whole distribution model seems to be install it where you may well already have your own virus software, but you trick the system to installing theirs as well. And virus stuff gets so intimate with the system when you got
if you have two of them running, it just brings it to a halt.
Well, yeah, you know, they start arguing with each other. You know, so that's one of those things. You know, I'm sure the reason why Java does it is Ask pays them by the download. You know,
Right.
And so it's in their economic incentive to trick you into installing something, even if you uninstall it 30 seconds later, they got theirs.
But the software is free, so really that's the price. The price you pay is having to deal with that pet peeve. So nothing's free.
Yeah.
So last pet peeve: calling to cancel.
Yeah, you know, there are a whole bunch of things that let you sign up online, but if you want to cancel it, you have to call them. You know, and you know, earlier you made the joke that, you know, we have these, you know, this actually makes phone calls. I'm sure they realize, and I am one of those people where, I mean, I've actually got to talk to a human being. There are things I've not canceled or held on to for weeks, months later than I would have, that could I go online and click cancel,
Right.
I would have canceled.
Right.
But because I have to call somebody, now.
You know, that's clearly they use that as a barrier, as a
and an opportunity. You know, I called up, you know, I got a notification that my satellite radio, you know, in my car couldn't get renewed because my credit card had expired. So I had to call in, and I decided, it's like, okay, they're asking $18 a month. You know, do I really need that? So I called in to cancel. The first person I got, you know, it's like, can you tell me why you're canceling? It's like, no. And she wouldn't accept that as an answer. It's like, well, is it this? Or it's like, just cancel the service. And I heard a click, and like, amazingly, I got disconnected without my, you know, they wouldn't disconnect me without my telling them why. I called back again. You know, the second agent handled it much better. And I don't know whether it's because they had a record of the first transaction. Probably not. Or maybe they said, he's cranky. Yeah. You know, the second person handled it much better and said, you know, if I gave it to you for half price, would you continue it for a year? And it was like, well, yes. You know, and
Right.
This is one of those things, you know, they're betting that the inconvenience of calling will make it, you know, so it's a pet peeve.
Well,
on the other hand, you know, one of the things I'm likely to do before the week is out is call my cable company, you know, because that's another one of those.
They have a department that's that handles people who want to cancel.
Yes.
Quick story, because this is not new. So remember when you used to sign up for like a CD service, or I was a member of the Science Fiction Book Club. And they would
I'm not surprised.
and if you didn't send in the card, they would send you automatically. You had to send in the card.
Saying you didn't want. No, you had to send in the card saying you didn't want.
And after I got like the 5th book that I didn't want, I called them up and I said, can you put me on a plan where I don't have to send the card? And they said, no.
No.
And I said, why not? I said, well, you need a good reason. I said, well, what's a good reason? I can't tell you. I said, well, then just cancel. Okay, that's a good reason.
Yeah.
And they switched me.
Yeah, but there's also a broader term called breakage, you know, and the whole notion is there are a whole bunch of things that a large number of people won't do. So if we, instead of giving you cash or a credit, I give you a gift card,
Right.
you know, that you may not actually use the full value of the gift card or the credit, you know, and there are a whole bunch, you know, there's a lot of the economy built on the fact that you're too lazy to actually follow through.
And on that note, we're bumping up against the hour. We are Alan Berkson and Jonathan Yarmis. We've been broadcasting live from the Stamford Innovation Center in beautiful downtown Stamford.
Yeah, we didn't call out the fact that we're in the courtroom again. You know, if you can see, you know,
yeah.
the Stamford Innovation Center is located in the old town hall, and we are literally doing this from the courtroom.
So we are here the second Friday of every month. You're welcome to join us here in Stamford and, of course, on Google+. Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you, Alan.
And we'll see you next month.